Okay, can everyone hear me now? Okay, perfect. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, we're going to start session 3 of our International Business course. The topic of this session, as you can all see on the monitor, is the strategies in a globalized world. I try to change the organization of the slides which I have prepared for you since I realized that this slide really matches with what we did in the previous 2 sessions, and it's regarding globalization. So I decided to carry on with this topic for this session. It's pretty much interesting, and once we get into it, for those of you who have done strategic management, you will notice that it's like a repetition of some of the topics which you have studied in that course. And for those of you who have not done the strategic management class yet, it's an interesting topic. It's really interesting, and I think that it is one of the we will be covering important parts of international business. So we go on with our first slide, which will be the summary of the contents which we're going to look into. We're going to look at the general definition of what the meaning of strategy is, as it will be the root of our discussion this session. Then we will look at the theories of business strategy, which the most important one of these is the SWOT analysis. Then we will get into the levels of strategy, internationalization strategies, the MNC organizational structures, and rethinking globalization. And finally, we will just wrap up whatever we have done. The copy of this slide, I will email it to you again after the class, as we did for the first session. Right after the class, inshallah, we'll email it to you guys. We'll move on to the next slide, which is the overview of strategy. We're going to look at the definition of what strategy is. It's about the firm's goals and means to achieve them, including the operational and organizational aspects. Well, every organization has its own set of goals and objectives, and at the same time, it defines for itself a set of strategies which will focus on. Some of them will focus on its internal aspect of its processes. And some of it will focus on its external issues. The internal and external factors play a part in strategy formation, which is true. And as we discussed, it will be the 2 factors that the strategy of every organization will look into in order to pave the way for the organization to reach its final set of goals and objectives that it has set for itself. Then the cultural background of the home country influences the corporate value, which is totally true. As we discussed, like for example, let's take a company that moves into the eastern part of the world. Like let's talk about, as I discussed, like if you remember in the first session, we discussed the fast food restaurants that moved into to this part of the world, to the eastern part of the world, which is basically where our countries are located. Of course, in the beginning, we did not have the culture of fast food meals and having fast foods, basically. However, once those companies and once those restaurants and those organizations moved to this part of the world, they basically brought in the cultural aspect from their countries, from their home countries, and it affected us basically. And of course, this thing is talking about the cultural background of the home country influencing the corporate values. It's not mainly about the part which I was discussing, which has to do with the market. It has to do with the corporate. Basically, companies that move into another country, we will discuss that they will have to have flexibility in order to adapt to the cultural situation of that country. However, at the same time, this flexibility must not be to the extent that the company will forget its own corporate values, because eventually every company has its own features and its own characteristics, which eventually it has to maintain in order to keep its corporate image. And changing external environment compels firms to respond and adapt. And of course, when they move into a country, the changes that happen in that environment will eventually force the organizations, and they have no other option but to respond to those changes and eventually adapt to those changes surrounding them. And finally, we must consider that firms must strike a balance between flexibility and control. This is what we discussed. This is very important, that the firms, when they move to a new location, just as they do have to be flexible and adapt to the changes and to the situation that exists in that host country or in that host, let's say, location, at the same time, they should be aware that they have to maintain their corporate image and their corporate specifications. And this refers to the control which we have here. And what your colleague is saying is perfectly correct. The world is changing, of course, because in fact, this strategy, it's a general strategy. It not only refers to the companies that want to become globalized, it also refers to even companies who want to stay within their own location. Because eventually, even if you're a small company in one small city, the culture and the needs and wants of the people in that small city eventually changes. And in order for you to sustain and basically maintain in that market, you will eventually have to respond to those changes and get along with them. But of course, at the same time, you have to be aware that your flexibility does not exceed the acceptable tolerance. I'm sure we all have heard of the SWOT analysis. I mean, this is something that is really important in today's world, and it's something that not only managers are facing, but even at other levels of a corporation, people do consider, even if they don't call it the SWOT analysis, but eventually they do consider it. I will just give you an example which is off the topic. I mean, it's not related to this, but I just want to tell you that some aspects of management which we study as MBA students or basically students in any managerial field, some of the things which we are studying are basically issues that all people are practicing throughout their life, even if they don't notice it. Like, I'll give you the example of marketing. You know that they say that one of the first things that a human being does once it's born, it's marketing. When a baby is born and starts crying, crying is a form of marketing. That baby is basically marketing itself that I exist. Like, it's trying to give out its message through crying. So that's marketing. Of course, we may not look at it as, we may not consider it as a marketing, but eventually it is. So this was just the thing off the topic which I wanted to say. Maybe it was interesting for some of us to know about it. However, getting back to the SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis, it's a really important aspect of strategic management and anything that has to do with setting a strategy for a corporation. And of course, as we get along with the SWOT analysis, and you will see the examples of each part of the SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis is not, it's not a fixed model. It's a model that has to be updated. It's a model that has to be adopted and adjusted through time. As you can see from the name, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. These are categorized into two separate categories. Two of them, which is strengths and weaknesses, basically refer to internal issues of a company or an organization, and opportunities and threats basically refer to the external issues that that companies and organizations have to consider. I'll just give you a few examples of basically what I mean by this. Let's say strength, as we said, it has to do with the internal issues of a company. It's like, for example, we say political support. A company who has, like, let's say, their managers or, like, let's say, friends with some big politicians, they have a strength, they have a winning card compared to other rivals and compared to other competitors that they have in the market, that they have political support, that they have people who are supporting them. Of course, especially in this part of the world where we have this sort of corruption so much, you can see this as maybe for some companies it's even the #1 strength of their company. Or we have the availability of funds, for example. Like a company may start operating and it may enter the market with huge availability of funds. Well, that's a huge strength of a company. Why? Because that company is entering the market with a very powerful strength in terms of its funding. Or like, let's say, for example, market experience, or even like strong leadership, or let's say like very skilled human resource, basically, and people who work for that company. These are all issues that can be considered as strengths, which of course later on, I mean, I would like to have your feedback as well and get some examples from you as well, because it's really important and it's really interesting, because as we go along, you will understand the importance of this SWOT analysis. I'll just give you one other example which happened in real life. A company which I used to work for, which actually I'm still working for, they were planning to open a what do you call it, a branch of the body shop company in Iran. And the people in the headquarters, what they wanted to know from this company, one of the things which they wanted to know about this company, other than a whole set of information which they wanted on the Iranian market, and basically like what percentage of, let's say, everyone's revenue is dedicated to like, let's say, buying cosmetics and stuff like that. One of the things which they really stressed on was a complete SWOT analysis that they wanted on opening such business in the Iranian market, which was honestly, I mean, when it comes to the real practice, it gets a bit tricky and it gets a bit difficult. So that's why I told you I really want to have your feedback as well, and just see like if you guys will come up with different like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But before I get to your feedback, I'm just gonna give you examples of each very quickly. Then I would like to hear from you guys. Then we have weaknesses, which again, weaknesses will be addressing the internal issues of a company. However, it's the negative aspect of it. Like, for example, let's say the production, if that company is into production, for example, let's say the production of that specific goods which they are producing is very complicated, it's very complex. That's considered as a weakness of that company. Or let's say the likelihood of increased costs. Why? Because we know that the #1 goal of every company is profit making. Hence, when you have a goal of profit making and making profit, the strategies which you make have to support this goal and have to lead the way for all the company processes, for all the organizational processes to lead to profit making. And profit making has two aspects. One is the basically the number of sales and your sales basically, and the other one is it's increasing your sales, and the other side of it is decreasing your costs. So if you have a threat, I mean a possibility that your costs may go up, that's like a weakness. It's like a threat. However, not the threat which we have on SWOT analysis, because threat is about the external issues. But this has to do with the internal issues of a company, so it's considered as a weakness and not threat. Or like, for example, let's say the limitation of skilled, like human resource, for example. Let's say a technology company like Apple, for example, is opening up an office in a city that you don't have much skilled laborers there, not much educated people are there. So it's not a wise decision for a company like Apple to move there. Why? Because one of the major problems that they will face, other than the other possible problems that may exist there, is the fact that they cannot find the proper human resource and the skilled human resource that they require for their business. So that can be considered as a weakness. Then we have the opportunities. Opportunities and threats, of course, there will be the external parts of the company. Opportunities will be like, for example, whatever that has to do with in terms of the economy, in terms of the community, in terms of the market and the image in the eyes of the people outside looking at your company. And we have threats, which threats can, like, we can come up with the example of government decision on, for example, taxation. That's a threat because it has nothing to do with the internal issues of a company. However, it's an external thing that affects that company. For example, if the government comes up with a new rule saying that, okay, the taxes until today was 10%, from tomorrow it's going to be 15%. This 5% increase is considered as a threat on that company. And like we're going to get into other examples as well, which I want to hear from you guys. So let's see what you guys had to say. Yes, what Mr. Samir has said is correct. It is a strategic planning method. Okay, that's great. Mr. Asif has experience in this. I would like to hear that. However, I have a problem. I cannot hear you guys. I mean, I would prefer to instead of writing, like if anyone has anything to discuss, if they can speak it loud. Mr. Asif, can you try talking? Maybe I can hear you. Hopefully.
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me? Hello? 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 Hello?
Can you guys hear Mr. Asif? Because I cannot hear him.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, okay. Well, I have a problem. Unfortunately, I cannot hear that.
Hello?
Okay, unfortunately, I cannot hear you. If it's possible, so you can write it for us, I'll appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Because I cannot hear what you're saying at all. from you. It's okay. Maybe if then we'll just do something. If there is anything that you guys want to discuss, we can leave it for next session. Hopefully, when I see what the problem is with the speaker. However, like if there is any short writings that you can write for us, like for example, Mr. Asif said that he has the experience. I can ask the questions and he can just write the short answers. First of all, that experience which you have in this regard, it's regarding what company, what type of company and business was that? Mr. Asif. Okay, I guess we lost Mr. Asif. Oh no, okay. Uh, okay. What type of organization is that? I mean, what type of business are you involved in? Because I want to ask you about each part of the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats that you dealt with. It was an NGO, okay. NGO based in where? Which country or which area? In Kabul. Okay. So can you just give us like an example, like let's say like one or two examples for each of the SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats.
Hello, dear teacher. If you don't hear me, I would like to talk to my classmates, my experience. You know, when I was working for an international NGO in Afghanistan, we had our own projects, and after first phase, we I did a SWOT analysis for my program implementation, and we invited several project supervisors and project managers from provincial levels, as well as we conducted SWOT analysis today's workshop, and we analyzed our strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats accordingly. And when we found the gaps in each portion of the SWOT analysis, we developed the possible and feasible strategy for each of the components according to the feasibility of the implementation approaches. I don't know, teacher, I think you cannot hear me, but my classmates may hear me. And that was all for the time being.
I think you guys can hear me. Okay. Well, it's okay. I mean, don't worry about what happened right now. Hopefully, it'll be sorted by next week. This issue with the regarding the speakers, and I apologize for that. It's really strange because my speaker is actually working, but on this software, for some reason, it's not working. Anyhow, um, you heard the examples that were given by your colleague, which that's good enough. That's okay. I just wanted you guys to have an extra, um, I mean, another source to hear from, basically. However, just to wrap up the thing about the SWOT analysis, as I discussed, SWOT analysis is not necessarily only related to a company that is going global. It can also be used, and it can also be an efficient tool for strategy making of a company that's operating locally. However, the company that is going to become internationalized and globalized, for them, in fact, maybe they will have some extra threats. Why? Because they're moving into a new location with so many different changes and modifications having to be made on their processes, on their different processes. So we'll just move on to the Porter's theory. Michael Porter, he's a Harvard basically graduate and professor who came up with a theory of competitive strategy. And in his theory, basically, he discussed the 5 forces that a company faces in terms of their basically competition with other rivals. And these 5 forces, which later on I will explain the 6th force as well, because some believe that we actually have 6 forces and not 5. But since it's called the Porter strategy, we have to go as per the 5 different forces that he discussed in his strategy. The first one is about the buyer's force on a company. And these forces are forces that eventually affect and impact that company who's doing the competition. One of these forces is basically put on that company through the buyers and through the buyer's bargaining power. Like, let's say, for example, last time we gave the example of Subway restaurant as one of the biggest, like, let's say, franchisers in the past couple of years. So let's say, for example, Subway as a business who's doing competition with other fast food restaurants. They have one of the forces that pressure that corporation is the bargaining power of the market, of the customers, of the people around. And they have to cope with that. They have to adapt with that. They have to adjust their prices and lower their prices to the extent to keep those people satisfied. And the reason for that is the power, as I said, bargaining power of the buyers. Then we have the suppliers. Okay, fine. We know that Subway basically is a seller of its products, but at the same time, it is a buyer of its raw material for its sandwiches and for the food that it's selling out. So not only it's a seller, it's a buyer as well. So the goods that it's buying from its suppliers, those suppliers again, they also have a bargaining power. Why? Because they can increase the prices. Like, let's say the bread, or like let's say the sausage that Subway is buying from its supplier. If they decide to increase the price, what will happen? Of course, for all these things that we're discussing right now, there is solution for them, and there are alternatives. So we are just saying that what are the forces that the companies do face, and of course they will have to adjust their strategies according to these things that happen, and these forces that are impacting the company. Then we have the potential entrants. Of course, the potential entrants are the people who are entering the market, or let's say we can also call them the new entrants, the newcomers that want to come into the market to do the competition. Of course, for the new entrants, it's really unlikely, and we're not going to say it's impossible, but it's really unlikely for new entrants to come in and compete with a restaurant like such as Subway that easily. Why? Because already there are the big gurus basically in the market, like such as, like, let's say for example McDonald's, Burger King, and all these big names are already there. And for a new entrant to come in, they have to spend so much money in terms of, let's say, the adding to their outlets and franchising and all these things, and of course advertisement. And so it's really, from that point of view, I think that these big restaurants, they don't really have much of a threat, unless, of course, as we said, that one of the strengths of a company is to have, in the previous slide which we discussed, let me just get back to that. On the strength, if you remember, one of the things which I mentioned was that a company may have a powerful resources in terms of funds. A new entrant may, like, let's say for example, a company ABC may enter the fast food industry with let's say, I don't know, $10 million of capital. That's a lot of money. So they can really start and to become a threat in terms of competing with Subway. Then we have the substitute product. Substitute product is when let's say the businesses that are not offering the same type of goods that you are, however, the goods that they are offering, it's similar to what you have. Like, let's say for example, New York Fries. It's not a restaurant. You cannot consider it as a restaurant because, like, let's say it's mainly selling French fries or whatever. It's not a whole meal. It's not a proper meal. But anyhow, you can say that it's a substitute product because when you're hungry, of course, your priority number one is to have a proper meal. But let's say you are hungry, there is a Subway, and across the street there is New York Fries. And let's say the Subway, there's a long queue that you have to stand for, and it's really expensive. So what you do is that you say, okay, fine, I'm just going to go and I'm not going to stand in the queue and I don't want to pay that much money. I'm just going to go and buy from New York Fries. At the end of the day, both of them will satisfy your hunger and you won't be hungry anymore. However, they are not, New York Fries is not considered as a competitor of Subway. They are offering substitute products. It's a product which is not the same as basically what you are offering as a Subway manager, for example. However, it's something which is similar to your product. And of course, the most obvious of all is the industry competitors. Of course, industry competitors is all the people that are offering something similar to you. What is the mix of established firms and newcomers, large and small firms? And of course, eventually, at the end of the day, in order to make your proper strategy, you have to consider all these 5 forces. As I discussed, Subway and Pizza Hut, yes, that will be an example of industry competitor. Why? Because they are both offering food, for example. Of course, if you want to get very detailed, they can also be considered as substitute products. Why? Because Pizza Hut is offering pizza, whereas Subway is offering, for example, sandwiches. But in the general form which we are looking at, both of these are restaurants and both of these are offering meals and food. So we just want to consider them as, let's say, one type of product. And as I told you, these are the 5 forces which Michael Porter has discussed. However, many people believe that there is also another force that is forcing companies, which is really true, and that is the government regulations. Why? Because other than all these things that they have to consider, don't you think that a company should also consider, let's say, for example, the taxing policies or the taxation policies of the government which they are working in? It's really important. Why? Because it affects their pricing and the what do you call, the ultimate profit that they want to make from their business. So, just for your information, consider these as forces. However, for your exam and for your knowledge, just remember the fact that Michael Porter discussed only 5 forces in his theory, which is the buyer's force, the supplier's force, which both of them are their bargaining powers, the potential entrants or the new entrants, the newcomers, then we have the substitute products, and eventually we have the industry competitors, which are the businesses that are operating in the same field as you are. We then discuss the resource-based theory of a firm. Resource-based theory, as you can see from its name, it's when you define your strategies based on the resources you have. Of course, I will give you the examples as we go along. These resources, like basically we categorize our resources as the physical resources, which we have here. Let me use the highlighter, hopefully it will work. We have the physical resources. No, I have not sent the slides there. I will send it at the end of the class. Resources are categorized into 3, which are the physical resources, which are the human resources, and the organizational resources. Then all these resources are basically defined. This thing which I just said, this is something general. It's not really part of this theory itself. The main part that we have to consider is the valuable, the rare, the non-imitable, and the no strategic equivalent. This is the part which we are going to basically discuss, and it's the main part and the main core of this theory. Of course, this theory will be just for the for your information, and it will be and it does affect the strategy making of a management that they want to create a new strategy for the company. For valuable, what we have is the attributes for this will be the potential for exploiting the opportunities. For rare, we have the firm's competitors not likely to have it. For not imitable, will be the difficult for competitors to copy, which I'm sure many of us would have plenty of examples for this one. And at the end, we have the no strategic equivalent, will be that no way a competitor can copy it by using alternative resources. For this, it gets complicated to get into the examples, because the topics are pretty much they are very close to one another. Let's say, for example, in terms of valuable. Okay, we'll go with the example of Apple products. When Apple wants to introduce its iPad, it really doesn't have much of a problem, since it has that advantage of brand loyalty and the valuability of its brand and its products. Basically, it will be difficult for any competitor to compete with Apple in terms of the value of its image. And a company like Apple, it has the upper hand. Why? Because when it wants to introduce iPad for the first time, we as customers, we as, let's say, loyal customers of Apple, we trust the quality of Apple by basically experiencing the Apple laptops, or let's say iPods or iPhones or whatever other products that it has. And because of the good experience and because of the good basically image that we have from this company in our mind, we trust this new product that is coming out, because we know that this basically product is coming from such company. Then we have the rare, which has to do with basically coming up with something unique. Like let's come up with the example of Google. Google is a company that I think even until the next, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years at least, I'm sure that no company can ever compete with Google. Why? Because whatever it did was unique in terms of everything, not only its final product, but even for its basically branding policies or whatever. Even look, if you want to consider its recruitment policies, if you want to consider its products, its flexibility, whatever. So in everything, it's really unique. I will give you the example. YouTube, for example, it was the result of the creativity of one of the Google employees by just basically using the facilities that Google was providing to its employees. Of course, like let's say all these technological equipment that they have at their disposal and they can use free of charge mostly. And as you can see, at the end of the day, it added so much to the profit of the company. I mean, even the strategy that they had in offering basically benefits to their customers does get back to them. I'm not really sure if you guys have seen the pictures of the working environment of Google employees. It looks like an amusement park. Like it looks, the colors and the equipment that they have, and the comfort and the games and everything. They even have like small beds that are there that in case like after their meal they want to take like a short nap and get back to their work. They have all these facilities there, and this is something unique. And even in terms of their final product, what do we all know Google for? We know it by its main page. When you press like www.google.com, what do you see? You see a search basically engine opening up in front of you. Even that was unique. Like right now, you do see other competitors such as Bing or let's say Alta Vista or other search engines. But at the end of the day, we all trust Google more. And it was one of the pioneers in this field, and at the same time, it grew so fast that I'm sure that none of its competitors can ever get close to Google in terms of all these things that it had. Then we'll go to the next topic, which is not imitable. Not imitable would mostly refer to technological products, like for example, let's say. Okay, fine. Let me just give you a good example, actually. Apple's iPhone. Apple's iPhone and Apple's basically electronic products. They all use the iOS system, and the iOS system is a very complicated operating system that Apple uses on its products, on its laptop and iPhone or iPad, and it's difficult to the extent that basically, at least until now, we never know about the future. At least until now, no one is able to copy that operating system. And even I saw a Chinese product that they copied the iPhone, and it looks just like the iPhone completely. Even the weight of the phone was exactly the same as iPhone. But when you switch it on, it had an Android operating system. Why? Because they managed to copy the hardware of the mobile phone, but they were not able to copy the software. So this is an advantage for a company like Apple, that their product, which one of their products is the iOS, their iOS product is not imitable. It's not possible to copy that product, and it's of course to the advantage of this company. Yes, of course, China doesn't need to respect the WTO agreements because it's not part of it, and I'm sure that they are pretty much happy that they're not part of it because they are basically, the whole economy is based on the things that they are doing against the WTO agreement. So I don't think that they will ever be interested to become a member of WTO. But anyhow, and at the end we have the no strategic equivalence. As you can tell from the name, there will be no way for a competitor to copy it by using an alternative resource. Like let's say, for example, iPad or tablets. Okay, the first company who came up with a tablet, I'm not sure whether it was Apple or Samsung or whatever, but let's take it as an example. Let's say, for example, it was Apple. If Apple for the first time came up with a tablet, the other rivals such as Samsung or Asus or other companies, they saw that there's no other strategic equivalent. They would either they had to start creating tablets, or they were not able to keep up in the competition in the tablet industry. Why? Because tablet was a unique product that came up. Like 10 years ago, none of us knew what a tablet was, or even less than that. None of us knew what a tablet was. We were all using laptops and PCs. However, tablet was something which was innovative. It was something completely new, and at the same time, there was no strategic equivalence for it. So other competitors, like for example, Samsung, couldn't create another product that created the satisfaction of me as a customer to go and buy that product instead of a tablet. So they were forced to come in by let's say producing different types of tablets and eventually competing with Apple, which of course all of you know that they even faced a big fight between Apple and Samsung. That even for a long time Samsung was not allowed to sell its tablets in Europe. Anyhow, because they believe that they copied so much from the iPhone and I don't know the iOS. Anyhow, moving to the next slide, we have the core competencies. Core competencies of every organization is the factor that eventually marks the competitive advantage of a company over its rivals and over its basically other competitors. Core competencies are the capabilities of a firm to maintain innovation and competitive edge. Basically, maintaining that competitive edge is that extra unique, special feature that your company has that makes you better than the other companies in the market. That's called the competency, or basically the core competency. Like let's say, for example, what do you think is the core competency of a company like IBM? Can anyone tell me? Okay, I guess we have no comments. Well, the core competency of a company, like let's say, for example, IBM, is that first of all, it was a pioneer in the business that it was doing, and in terms of the sorry, you guys have a problem with the sound? Oh, okay, great. Okay, yeah. So I was saying that a company like IBM, their core competency was that they were a pioneer in what they were doing in terms of their business, and also the complexity of the technological advancements that they had was their core competency. So it was really difficult, or let's say even impossible, for companies to compete with IBM. And I think, I'm not really sure, maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but even until today, we really don't have a proper competitor for IBM. Of course, we have bigger companies than IBM, but we don't have like you know, even the like even the some of the products which they have for the digital cashiers and in some fields like that, or even the automation system. I heard that the IBM product is something that it's something like Cisco and the software which we're using right now. Some other companies may offer their offerings will be more like substitute products. It's not that they are real competitors of IBM. Why? Because the core competency of IBM is really complex and it's really difficult for another company and a rival to get to really become similar to IBM. Or even Google, which we gave the example. Yes, we have companies like, let's say, Bing, for example, or other search engines that are competing with Google. But at the end of the day, none of them can ever become as big as Google in terms of offering such vast variety of different programs and applications to the customers. Well, true, Yahoo is, but we all know that basically Google is #1 by far away. I mean, in terms of because like Yahoo has some other features like the Yahoo News and some other products, whereas Google and it's also like on it's emphasizing on its email services that it's providing. But at the same time, okay, sir. Whoever wants to go pray, I mean, they can go. I'm not going to move on to the next slide for the next 2 minutes. 3-4 minutes. So you guys can go and so hopefully you won't miss much. I'm just going to try to give, elaborate more on this slide until you guys come back. Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, the competencies that Google has, it's to some extent different from Yahoo. I mean, yes, they both have search engines, yes, they both have email services, and yes, they both have a variety of, let's say, other applications that they provide. But for example, Google has something called an Android, whereas Yahoo doesn't have such thing. That's just a typical example. And I'm sure there's a lot more because since my field is not IT, I cannot basically elaborate more. But I'm sure that if we do even a small research on the difference between Yahoo and Google, we can see that they're not really very much comparable. Anyhow, then we have the competencies versus products, saying that products come and go, whereas the core competencies facilitate a steady pipeline. Basically, the main key word here in this line is this steady. It's the word, it's the term steady. Why? Because I'll give you the example of Nintendo and Sony. If you guys remember the Nintendo, the video games, at some point, I think that they did not even have a competitor. It was only them and Sega, as far as I know. Whereas Nintendo was more attractive to children. Why? Because it had a variety of games. I mean, the variety was more, and they had so much of sales, and basically their product was a unique product, and they had so much of sales during the years that it was their, basically we can say it was their sales boom era. However, they were not able to keep it steady. They were not able to have that as a consistent, like, let's say, strategy. However, Sony, which we cannot really compare the two in terms of industry, but what I'm just trying to say is that in terms of consistency, like a company like Nintendo, they just came into the picture. Even now, they still have their stuff. They still have products, but it's really off the. I mean, it's really way off in terms of competition. Like you may go to many electronic stores and ask for Nintendo, and they would say that we don't even have any of their products. Only few shops have it. Why? Because there isn't much demand for Nintendo products anymore. So basically, they just came in and they went. Why? Because they did not have a core competency. They just had a unique product in the market which they introduced. However, a company like Sony, for example, they have this consistency. Why? Because let's say since whenever that they started their company, whatever electronic that they wanted to start making and developing, they they had the core competency and they had this flexibility to change and modify their product according to the needs of the people. Like let's say, for example, if they came up with the televisions, and eventually at the end the LCDs came out, right away they started changing and shifting to LCDs. Then they went to LEDs, then they went to projectors and whatever. If you wanted, like let's say, consider that even in the video gaming industry, they came up with the Sony PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, and they keep upgrading and basically modifying their product as per the interest of their customers, of course, their loyal customers. So that was their core competency. And another thing in their core competency is that I'm not sure how many of you guys are really much interested in PlayStation and their product. The games of PlayStation in PlayStation 3, if I'm not mistaken, they are Blu-ray, so it's not really possible to even copy those. So one of the reasons they upgraded their product was to prevent and stop the duplication of the video games, which was happening. And of course, as your colleague said, China was one of the main basically countries that was doing this illegal copying of the Sony PlayStation games. Then we have the 3 criteria, which is they're critical to a number of the firm's products, add value to the end product, and difficult for rivals to imitate. This is something which we discussed right now. And of course, difficult for rivals to imitate was something that Nintendo was not able to keep up. They were not able to keep upgrading themselves to an extent that they would stop other competitors of even thinking to enter the market. However, I'm not sure whether it was because they didn't have the capacity to upgrade, or they were greedy and they thought that, okay, fine, since everyone is buying our product, let's just keep it as it is. But whatever the reason was, they were not able to keep this as a steady, basically as a steady strategy. And hence they fell behind to the extent that right now in many of the electronic shops, if you go, you don't even hear the name of Nintendo anymore. It sounds new to everyone, to many people actually. Okay, Ms. Nadia, I think if this is the first session of the international visit, I think I sent you the first chapter. The first chapter we discussed the globalization. This is the second chapter that we're discussing in the third session right now. And of course, at the end of the class, I will email you the slides so you'll have it as well, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. And eventually, there's just the very common thing that it says that how does the firm identify its core competencies, which is pretty much logical. We look at what is their strongest technologies and skills that they have, and what activities should be kept in-house. That's really not very difficult to understand. So I hope that everyone's back from their prayers, so we can just simply move to the next slide. Okay, then we have the stakeholder management theory. Before we just continue, we just will have to understand who the stakeholders are. We have the internal stakeholders, or basically the direct stakeholders, or the external stakeholders, or the indirect stakeholders. Stakeholders cover a broad range of direct and indirect interests. Direct, which will be the internal. Links are with owners, suppliers, and employees. And indirect stakeholders include communities in a firm's diverse location worldwide. I think many of us know this because the definition of stakeholders is one of the initial terminologies that we learn in business management. And mostly, when we hear the term stakeholders, what comes to our mind and what comes to our mind is the direct and the internal part of the stakeholders, which is the owners of the business, and it links to the owners, suppliers, and employees. However, we should understand that companies also have social responsibilities as well towards their community. So you cannot say that, okay, I'm a manager of a company or I'm an owner of a company and I can do whatever I want because it's my company. That's not correct. You cannot create, like, let's say, pollution and just say that, okay, it's my company and I can do whatever I want. That's not the case. Why? Because the people who are living next in the neighboring, basically in the surrounding of your company, they will be suffering because of this pollution. So you have social responsibilities as well. Those people around you, the government, the community, and all these things around you, they're all your indirect stakeholders, which you have to keep them satisfied as well. It's not only your direct stakeholders that you have to maintain satisfied. Also, the indirect stakeholders must be satisfied when any business is operating its operations. How can managers involve stakeholders in decision making? It's pretty much simple. One is exchange of information. One of the main types of this information is the account, the company account, which you share with your stakeholder. And interaction and network involvement and relationship of trust with stakeholders. And of course, one of the main things that the companies have, I'm not sure if you have noticed it or not, but almost all the big corporations and organizations, they have a department which is related to their social responsibilities. Basically, as we have here, corporate social responsibilities. Basically, they come up and they design different, let's say, events, social events, and like they do things. Of course, it's at the end, it's all about creating a better image for themselves, but at least it shows their goodwill when it comes to their community and when it comes to the community that they're operating their business in. Yes, buyers and society are indirect, yes. Okay, and then we move to the levels of strategy, and I'm just going to do 2 more slides until we want to discuss the thing about the assignments that we have on the 5th session. The levels of strategy. Levels of strategy is basically broken down into 3 different levels in a corporation. In the corporate level of strategy, the company's basically main intention is to maximize the shareholder value and satisfy customers. So this is the 2 main goals and strategies when it comes to corporate strategy, when it comes to the high level of the strategy. At a lower level, when it gets to the competitive strategy, the company looks at its product and its market. So basically, that's what it comes as the important issues when it comes to a competitive strategy. And when you discuss products, it means that at a corporate strategy, you don't necessarily care about the product that you should make. You don't necessarily care about what features should I add to our next product or what was the problem with our previous product. You simply look at maximizing the shareholder's value, which is the profit making, and satisfying the customers. Then when it gets to your competitive strategy, when it gets to the level that you want to basically see that what you have to do in order to keep up as compared to the rivals, is looking at your product feature and your products, and also your market segments. And at the lowest level, let's say, which is the functional strategies, you have the finance, you have the operations, you have the human resource management, you have the marketing, which is broken down to product strategy and country strategy. The reason why you have the country strategy as well is because it's considering the fact that this company, for example, is a global company. Of course, if it's only a company that's operating in one location only, you don't necessarily have that country strategy. It doesn't really make sense. And of course, one other part which I would want to add to the functional strategies, which is really, really important, is the procurement, which is, I don't know why they haven't mentioned it in this diagram. It's the procurement strategy. The procurement strategy, it gets us back to this slide of, let's see where it was. Where was it? Procurement strategy. Okay. Procurement strategy is like it's like this part of this quarter strategy that we have. It's about how strong the supplier's bargaining power is, and the procurement and of course the buyer as well. So these two parts are related to that, which I was just saying. Why? Because procurement under finance, yes, it is, but we want to say that it really is that important to the extent that it should be mentioned separately, because it's a broad issue itself, in the sense that a company is a buyer, and at the same time it may be a supplier as well. It's a buyer of raw materials, and it's a supplier of its finished product that it's having. So eventually that procurement, I think it's really important and it should be there, but if anyhow it's not there. So that's the functional level of strategy that that a company must consider: the finance, the operations, HRM, and the marketing. Then, of course, the diagram, it doesn't have much to say, because it's somehow, the diagrams that we have in our slides, it's somehow a summary of what we discussed in like the previous few slides, as we also have here. Same thing here, internationalization strategies. This also refers to, for those of you who remember what we discussed in session 1 and session 2, that we discussed these things. Like we discussed, for example, in terms of, we said if we're a company and we want to become globalized, according to our intention and the amount of commitment that we are willing to take, and the amount of risk and the amount of investment that we are willing to put in, we choose from this part down. From the lower, which is export, as you recall, we said that export is it's option number 1 with the least amount of commitment and the least amount of risk. Why? Because simply you are just doing the export of your goods. Then we have production under license and FDI at the end. Then production under license, as I said, it's just a diagram which is summarizing what we did before. Production under license will refer to franchising and outsourcing. And the FDI, which we discussed and elaborated more, it gets into greenfield investment, which I discussed to some extent in the previous session, and I said that we will get into more later on. I will discuss in our next slide, hopefully. And acquisition, and also we have the joint venture and equity stake. Yes, you are right, sir. Of course, procurement does come under finance, but as I said, like just as we had here, like you see, we have the marketing, but these two parts are so important that they put a separate aspect to it. So what I'm saying is that other than finance here, they should have something separate, and they should have the procurement mentioned here. That's what I actually meant to say. Anyhow, so this is just a diagram that, to some extent, it summarizes what we discussed in session 2. And finally, the last slide which we're going to cover tonight, it's this one: to distinguish and to choose between the greenfield or the acquisition. If you remember, these two are FDI options, foreign direct investment options. So if you're deciding to do foreign direct investment, two of the options that you have is either greenfield or acquisition. For greenfield, if you remember, as I said, as it says from its name, greenfield, you can understand that it's basically starting from scratch. It's basically entering somewhere of, let's say, a raw piece of land that you want to build a new plant, for example. Yes, Mr. Nacha, that's correct. And I'm just going to go through of the things that is written in the slide. It's customized design of the plant. Of course, a good feature of this would be the customized design of the plant, because since it's a plain piece of land, you can make it however you want. I'll just give you an example. Some people say that, I mean, one of the things that is there about Dubai right now, for those of you who have seen Dubai, Dubai is a city that changed so much since the past few years. But one thing that's there is that it wasn't a big deal for them. It was something very simple to become what it is right now. Because most of the cities, like for example, the cities that we're from, if any of you guys are from, let's say, Afghanistan or Malaysia or Iran or whatever, these are old countries and old cities. So already there was so much of construction and so much of development there. So when you want to create new structures, it's really difficult. Why? Because you already have so much of developments from the past. Whereas the case of Dubai, it's different, because Dubai started to become Dubai with so much money in a piece of desert, basically in a vast desert. So it was very simple to make Dubai as what it is right now. So we can say, for example, Dubai was a greenfield. It was type of a greenfield foreign direct investment for those companies that were pioneers in investing in Dubai. Then control over build and operations. Of course, it's saying that you have the control. Just as it's customized, you have the control over what you are building and all the operations that's going on. Everything basically is in your hand. However, it's slow to get going. It's difficult. It needs so much money, and it's in higher investment. And the lack of knowledge is the drawback, because you're starting from scratch. You're entering somewhere new, and it's really difficult. Like, let's say, for example, the companies that initially moved into Dubai, it was a real risk for them. It was really difficult. They had no knowledge of what this country will eventually be. Of course, looking at it today, they succeeded so much and they made so much money. But at that time, considering the decision that was made at that time, it was really a risky decision, because who would think that investing in a piece of desert would become what Dubai is right now? And no pre-existing customer base, of course. Like, again, the case of Dubai, like let's say 10, 15 years ago, or even more when they moved in, the population of Dubai was less than maybe 1/4 of what it is right now. And even that small population, most of them were poor. And because at that time, actually it's more than, of course, 15 years, but I'm talking about the time when oil was not discovered yet, because oil is recently discovered here in UAE. Recently, as in like, let's say 50, 55 years. So before that, people were poor here, and they were basically making money from fishery and, let's say, limited amount of, let's say, trade by vessels and small ships that were going here and there. So there were no pre-existing customer base here in Dubai. Then we have the acquisition on the other hand, which is, of course, acquisition is quicker to get up and running. It's less investment involved. It's faster, and basically you don't have the problem of lack of knowledge and lack of local knowledge. Why? Because you are entering a business with the local business. So already the experience is there. Already the pre-existing customer base is there. So you really don't have much of a problem. Local company has local knowledge, existing workforce and customers. Also, cultural tensions between acquirer and local firm. This can be considered as a negative aspect of acquisition, because of the cultural differences between the organizations. I'll give you the example. If you are a company that's moving, for example, let's say to Dubai, as a greenfield FDI, you are all by yourself. It's not an acquisition. You just have so much of investment. You're bringing your money to Dubai and you want to start your business. You have all the control over your business, and you don't have to adapt. You don't necessarily have to adapt to any organizational cultural changes. Of course, to some extent, you have to be flexible when it comes to the market because they are a foreign market. However, in terms of internal policies and internal operations in your company, you don't have much problems. However, when you are going through an acquisition and you are acquiring a company here in Dubai, you have the cultural differences between you as a foreign company and the company in Dubai. It's two different cultures. So these cultural clashes may create some tension and weaker control over quality, and that's true because when you are going through the acquisition, of course, you have less control as compared to a greenfield, which you have the full control. So that will bring us to the end of today's lecture. It depends how much you buy of that company. Yes, of course. These will get into the details as well. We are discussing the general form because getting into the details is not part of the topic of this. Of international business. That's like getting more into details. We're just discussing the general terms because we want like everyone to just simply become familiar with the different terms that are discussed. Like, for example, it's important as an international student to know what FDI is and what are the options and what are the features of each option. But getting into further details, that's like when you get into the basically the case itself. So I only received one email until today, which was regarding the group that was formed by Mr. Mustafa Ghaffari, and he just gave me the details of his group, but I haven't received any email from anyone else. Of course, it's not late yet, and I just want you guys to form your groups by now because I don't want to leave everything for the last minute, and it's to your benefit. So, so hopefully I will be receiving your email soon, and I want to know if there were any questions for those of you who started and who are willing to start. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer. Okay, what about the number of group? Actually, the number of group I asked to limit to 4 because, but you don't need to have 5 people because it's not a very complicated assignment, and please try to keep it maximum by 4. There are some of you who had a problem of forming groups and basically keeping contact with the rest of the colleagues. And I asked them. I said it's okay. I mean, you can do it also individually. But if you do it individually, you will lose some marks. Not too much, but you will lose some marks because anyhow, it's a group presentation. So if you're not doing it in group, it means that you are losing part of the marks. But it's okay. In general, it's okay. You can also do it individually as well. Okay. In terms of the, let me just find the, just give me a second. Okay. I sent the email to each of you guys. I'm just going to read through the email, the main points that I mentioned in the email, so everyone, those of you who don't recall, they will know the details. On the due date, it's 13th of July, which is our fifth session, which is about 2 weeks from now, because today was the third session. Then each group should not exceed 4 students and should submit a work breakdown report stating each student's contribution to the presentation. So other than the names that you will send to me, by the time that you're submitting your assignment, I will also need to have a report that shows that what did each of the students do and what did each contribute for the presentation and the assignment. Then each group will have 10 minutes for presenting their slides, and of course time management is important. So please be careful. I mean, if your 10 minutes is like, let's say, 9.5 minutes, it's okay, or 10 minutes and 30 seconds, or maybe 11 minutes, that's okay. But if it's too short or too long, you will lose marks on that. So you have to make sure that you can manage to wrap up your content within that 10 minutes. And students, as I mentioned, students who wish to submit the presentation individually will lose some marks that is dedicated to the group work. But in general, it's okay and it's acceptable. You can also do it individually. And please make sure you insert references. It's really important. I want to make sure that you insert the references. This is just a suggestion. It's not really important, and I will not affect it in the marks, but it's just a suggestion. Try not to use Wikipedia much, because we all know that Wikipedia is not a solid source. I mean, for referring just for extra information, it's okay. It's good to refer to Wikipedia. It's easy and fast, quick information. But for doing an assignment or a research or a project, it's not really reliable to use Wikipedia as your source. And that's it. So please make sure you send me your group members by next week, which is today actually. But it's okay. I can list that thing for you guys, because I believe that some of you guys were not in the class. So I will leave it for next week. Hopefully by next week I will know that everyone's groups and how you have divided your groups. Regarding the topic of the presentation, it will be a company that you will choose that you consider as a proper example of an acquisition of joint venture, manufacturing under license, or franchising. And the way you will basically present it, that each group must choose one of the above modes, briefly explain what it means, and support your literature with a company that best fits into the strategy. For example, if you choose franchising as the topic of your presentation, you may explain how Subway restaurant has been on the top in the recent years and explain its strategies and why you have chosen this business as an example for your discussion. So basically you want to explain that why you think that the company that you chose is the best example of the mode of globalization that you chose. Like if you chose, for example, joint venture, what company are you choosing and why have you chosen that company? So I guess that's about it. What about the presentation? Who should be presenting? That doesn't matter. You can. That's up to you guys. Like if you decide that each of you, I mean, all of you want to do the presentation, like each of you will do one slide, for example. That's okay. Or maybe you have decided that one person does the presentation and the others, for example, they are working on gathering the information. That's also fine with me. And yes, 3 members, it's okay. Maximum 4, and not individual. So 2, 3, or 4, it's okay. Of course, preferably 3 or 4, it's better. But even 2, it's okay. And I think I answered all the questions here. 4 is okay, yes. You found your group and don't want to present individually anymore. Okay, great. That's perfectly okay. That's perfectly fine. So, so please just do me a favor and send me your group details. Other than Mustafa Ghaffari, who already has sent me his the email. Please send me an email, and And if there was any other question that you have, I'll be more than happy to answer. And inshallah, by tomorrow, hopefully, I will send you the slides as well. Is there any other question?